Good evening and welcome to Legal Tech Live. This is the final episode for the season for this year. And we are here with our guest tonight, Alan Rodriguez. I've known Alan for a few years, active in California's Access to Justice Committee, as well as through 1-400, his company. But we're here tonight to talk about Singular Law Group, which is a law firm that he has created in Arizona. And I'm going to come out and, because I was pre-promoting this show saying that this is part of the Arizona Sandbox, Alan has corrected me that this is not Arizona Sandbox. This is a changed law in Arizona. So Alan is not a lawyer, yet he is the president and one of the owners of Singular Law Group out of Arizona. So here's a little brief background on Alan. You've got legal product development strategist for nearly 20 years in the legal industry. Mm-hmm. You have, prior to working with Singular Law Group, you had founded 1-400. You are the founder there. And you were the director of attorney services at LegalZoom. And so you've been in this industry a long time. You've been in it on the marketing side, on the product development side. You've been an advocate for changing. Alan, welcome to the show. And also, this is Veterans Day we're recording on. So Alan mentioned that he is a United States Army veteran. So thank you for being here on Veterans Day, and thank you for your service.
I really appreciate that, Nick. And thank you for creating an awesome platform to have like really great discussions around legal tech. And I'm a big fan. I know lots of people are. So thanks.
Appreciate that. That's very nice of you. Alan, you were part of ATILS, and I always forget the access through innovation of legal services. Yeah, thanks. That acronym was way too long, and I've butchered it every time since the beginning of that committee. Yeah. So you were active there. You've been active in the legal industry for 20 years. You've been an innovator for as long as I've known you, which is probably 4 or 5 years now. Mm-hmm. How did the Arizona law firm come to be? Singular Law Group come to
be? Well, so, I've been working for kind of re-regulation is the way I like to describe it, right? Not deregulation, that sort of thing. I think that's a poor choice of words when people describe it that way, but I've been working really to promote better access to justice. And I think the way we do that is through re-regulation. Not the only approach, but certainly a big gap in how we do that. So through my work there, it was kind of always the dream to be able to prove the case, right? Because, you and I were part of this Twitter session earlier today where, people are voicing their frustrations. Like the way opponents kind of prevent this from happening is like, show me the evidence that these changes will bring about access to justice. And we know like, well, until we can actually re-regulate or do these things, we can generate evidence, right?
Right.
So
I will give a shout out because they were so kind to do it for our show tonight. Chris Brown and Joey Gartner, who did the Twitter space, are here. So thank you guys for joining and for the shout out on your Twitter space. But yeah,
that's right. It was a great session, guys. So getting back to this thing, like how did the law firm start in Arizona? Well, Arizona was one of what I would describe as the courageous states that went all in. There's a Sandbox Model in Utah, which I think for me, the Sandbox is really a compromise for moving in this direction. And I'm not a big fan of Sandbox. We could talk about that in a minute, but Arizona went all in. And, I want to help make the case that re-regulation will have a positive impact on access to justice. And so, it kind of makes sense that I throw my hat in the ring. So I've partnered with Mary Jutton. We are co-founders of Singular Law Group, PLLC in Arizona. I'm the majority shareholder. She's a minority shareholder. Together, we're partners. She's a lawyer. I'm not a lawyer. And we hope to create eventually a general practice firm that's really kind of focused on what I would describe as people's law, right? Yeah. So, and I know when sometimes some people use that firm, that name, like personal injury attorneys, mass tort firms.
Sure.
That's not what we're talking about, right? Like everyday working people, right, who have either, inadequate or no access to justice. That's who we're targeting. And so when we looked at, like, say, problems in the legal industry, we want to layer this. And the first layer of that, like family law, for example, about 80% of litigants in family law matters, there's at least one party that's unrepresented. And so, that's a category where we know there's a big gap. So we're starting there. And then we're going to layer on other areas as we gain traction.
Excellent. And so when did Singular Law Group open its doors?
So technically it was opened, I think, in March of 2021, just under Mary Jutton as the sole owner, founder. And it was pending our application approval. So we submitted our application in March. And then it was approved in August. So we've officially been in operation since about the end of August.
Okay, so a couple of months. All right.
Yep.
And so are you hoping to get some of the evidence that you've been fighting to establish but through your own experience here?
Yeah, and one of the things that we're trying to do, Mary and I are trying to do, is actually be very transparent in our journey, right? Because the thing about it is, like, right now there's this kind of protectionist kind of feel where, like, oh, these non-attorney people are going to steal my business, or the LegalZooms of the world are going to come in and steal my business, that sort of thing. No, I don't feel that way. I think instead of, like, the pie becoming smaller, we want to make the pie bigger, actually. All the people that don't have access now, those are the customers we're going after. We're going after the people that are being ignored by the industry now, right? So, like, in that sense, we're not stealing anybody's business, but like, we want to be very transparent in the journey, because no single firm is actually going to be able to solve this problem, right? We'd be naive to think that we're going to become this, like, big giant powerhouse that solves all of access to justice problems. Like, that's not how it's going to work. So we hope to be very transparent in our journey, develop case studies, be transparent in the business models that we've adopted, all that sort of thing, so more people can actually participate. I don't view it, there's 7 million people in Arizona. That's a lot of people that everybody eventually is going to have a legal issue, right? Like, research indicates that. So for me, this is good for everybody. Yeah.
Good. All right. And so tell us how the business structure works. So you're not a lawyer. It used to be that you had to be, a firm had to be owned by a lawyer. How about the lawyers in the firm? How does that work? How are you hiring?
Yeah, so Arizona's done a really great job of looking out for the best interests of the consumer at the end of the day, right? Like, that's what they're there for, like consumer protection. So for this to work, you could be a majority shareholder you can be a non-attorney and be the majority shareholder of a firm. What you do have to, one requirement is you have to have a compliance lawyer. And the compliance lawyer could either be an employee, a shareholder, or in some cases, even like a contracted firm. So there's one organization, I can't remember their name, but they applied for ABS, and what they didn't have a compliance lawyer in-house or as an employee, but they contracted with the Arizona law firm to be the compliance lawyer for their entity, right?
Okay.
So, yeah, so Mary Jutton is the Arizona licensed attorney. She's our compliance lawyer. She's a minority shareholder. And then in terms of, like, structure, there's essentially a firewall between what I do and then what the lawyers do at the firm, right? So even though I own the law firm, because I'm not a lawyer, like, I don't have, like, I can't kind of be involved in the attorney-client privilege. Right.
Which makes sense.
Yeah. So, like, there has to be kind of a clear line that separates that. So, my role is to focus on the product development, the client experience, the operations, the automations, the scaling of the business, the capital kind of work involved in the business. And then Mary and the lawyers that work at Singular Law are charged with, great legal services, right? Great delivery of legal services. Yeah.
You know what this sounds to me like, and I don't know if you've seen any of this information provided before, but this sounds like a medical director for the compliance lawyer issue.
Yeah.
Feels a lot like, Well, if you're going to offer some sort of medical services, some companies are required to have a medical director or a doctor who is a part of the company, right? To make sure we're in compliance. That's what this sounds like to me. I don't know if there was evidence related to that you've seen in your studies, but that's exactly what it sounds like to me.
Yeah, so I wasn't part of like the Arizona task force, but I do know through conversations with people who were involved that like they looked at the medical industry as an example, right? So re-regulation happened in the medical industry, years back, right? Where you have like professional administrators, kind of working behind the scenes while doctors focus on delivering, great care. So,
great.
Yeah. So I do think that was taken into consideration for sure.
We've got a question. Is this a question or a comment, Chris? Let me see here. It does look like a comment. Question. Okay, thanks. I'm sorry. Chris Brown says, one complaint about non-lawyer ownership. By the way, folks in the Facebook, Veronica, I see you over there. And folks here in the Zoom, we do take questions. This is time to ask them. One complaint about non-lawyer ownership is that lawyers might act in ways to benefit owners or investors to the detriment of clients. He disagrees with that concern, but have you taken any concrete steps or procedures to make sure lawyers act in the best interest of the client?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's frequent opposition, right? Like this is the thing. I'm going to say this one thing. I'm sure it's going to ruffle some feathers, but like, the loudest opponents, kind of use this argument frequently. And when I hear this, it's kind of funny. It's like, do you really think somebody like me, Alan Rodriguez, can really just like put the screws on you and get you to do something unethical? That, like, I would imagine like somebody tells me, hey, Alan, let's go steal this thing together. I'm like, what, are you crazy? No, I'm not going to steal that thing. I'm not cut from that cloth, like, so people always have an ability to say no. And it's like in our particular case, Mary Jutton, when we were applying, they interviewed her. They didn't interview me, surprisingly.
Interesting.
They just wanted to, some of the questions they were asking, it's like, how do you know this guy? Like, are you sure you're not going to be influenced or whatever? And if you've ever met Mary personally, you'd know nobody can influence her in like one direction or another, right?
Right.
But to get to Chris's question, again, it's like Mary and the legal team are charged with the actual legal advice, the legal services. I just play no role in that, right? Like my role is very clearly defined in structuring the business, right? Like worrying about the operations and the client experience, and so like maybe an example, Chris, of how we separate these two things. It's like, say a client calls to complain about an attorney at, Singular Law Group, right? If that happens and me as like the chief customer experience officer or something like that needs to address it, I have to inform that client, at least under our policy, I'd have to inform that client that like, hey, I'm not, the attorney that's working with you cannot tell me the specifics about your case.
Okay.
I'm not allowed, they're not allowed to share that with me. However, if you really want me to get the other side, right? Now that I've heard your side and you really want me to investigate this further, we have a process that allows you to waive privilege, right? So that way I can talk to the attorney, but you have to agree to that. You have to sign that. You have to understand what that means, right?
Okay.
And then only then can we maybe investigate that issue a little bit further. So that's an example of how we set up these policies that really kind of make sure that we're creating auditable processes for, kind of making sure that we stay in compliance with the rules.
Excellent. That's a great question, Chris. Thanks for that. Chris, also Chris and Mary Jutton are both former guests of the show. So always nice to see guests back. And Johan, also a former guest. He asks, will you get any reciprocity in other jurisdictions?
I think I don't know. That's the short of it. Here's the way I see it.
To be determined.
Not a lawyer, right? But here's the way I see it. So like, we're a law firm, just like any other law firm. We have a license. I'll eventually hang it up on the wall here, just like you walk into the law office. We've got all that from the state of Arizona. which means we could just, set up an of counsel relationship, right? Like if this was a non-ABS law firm, we could set up an of counsel relationship, or we can hire an attorney who's licensed in Colorado, and then we can perform work in Colorado and Arizona, right? I think where the friction is going to come is from the states that haven't adopted or are opposed to ABS, like say Florida, right? That was the big discussion earlier. Like Florida will probably say, hey, while Arizona might think Singular Law Group is a law firm, if you're working with them, we're going to take your license, right? Like we're going to give penalties there. So like, that's the kind of thing. It's like, what will the New York State Bar say about working with in Arizona ABS? So it's less about who we're able to work with, because like any other law firm, we're duly licensed. It's more about what the other regulatory bodies say about their attorneys working with those organizations. Okay. This happened to LegalZoom, like in 2010, there were a couple of like state bars were like, hey, before you start working with LegalZoom, you need to run it by us first, but.
Okay. All right. So that will be determined later on the reciprocity. I get you just not sure yet. And you guys are.
Johan will appreciate this. We do intend to push, right, and try to make that happen. So that way we could spread better access to justice even outside of Arizona.
Yeah, excellent. And Chase says, Chase Ertl says over in the Facebook that let's all be hopeful we'll see ABS passporting eventually. I think we are. Many of us who are here tonight would like to see that happen. So the focus is starting in the family law area. The attorneys working for you now are primarily doing family law related work.
Yeah, so we're kind of layering services in order of need, right? So like I gave the stat earlier, 80% of family law litigants, there's at least one party that's unrepresented, right? And there are approximately 2.4 million divorces per year, in America. And so like, do the math, that's a lot of unrepresented people. That's a lot of friction in courts. That's a lot of people getting hosed at the end of the day. So as the business person, I look at that as opportunity. Like, hey, the industry is kind of ignoring this, these people for one reason or another. So we want to address that. So that's what we're starting. And then through relationships that we have here at 1-400 with .coms that are also providing DIY services, we've aligned ourselves with those types of organizations. I can't name any in particular right now, but come December and January, we hope to move a lot more volume. I think divorces really pick up in February, like after Valentine's Day, it's just the kind of the way it works, right?
Yeah.
But so we have lead channels of other .coms that are providing some DIY services, but at the end of the day, I know this from my experience in the legal industry and my experience at LegalZoom in particular. People want to do stuff online. They want pricing predictability. They want the flexibility that doing stuff online offers them, but they don't want to trust themselves to do it. They want professionals to kind of help them at the end of the day.
They want to outsource it. They just want it to be easy.
Yeah. So, that's what Singular Law hopes to do, right? Starting with family law because of the opportunity. The next area is in Arizona in particular, the population of the Latino population in Arizona is something like 32%, right? So it's like 2 million of 7 million people. And then Latino-owned businesses are the fastest growing segment of business across the country, and in Arizona in particular, based on the population. So like they're growing 20% faster than any other group of business. And so from that perspective, that market, the Latino businesses, are actually the least likely to get funding, the least likely to scale past a certain amount of employees. And there's this really great research done at Stanford Business School. The reasons why is because they lack administrative knowledge. They lack, I don't have a license, or they go to the bank to get money to raise capital, right? Or raise debt. And they just don't have their stuff in order. They're not incorporated. They're not sort of thing. So Singular Law, the next layer, is going to be working with these kind of small micro businesses to create like subscription legal services where we can put them on a path towards scaling, right? So move away from being a firefighter and more of an advisor that sets these businesses on a trajectory for growth.
So that formation, business governance, all that.
Compliance, right? Yeah, administrative licensing, all that sort of thing. And there's a number of like great business development agencies, nonprofit organizations in Arizona. And so we hope to align ourselves with them to be a distribution point. Now, subscription service is going to be very important because for us to keep the price of law down, right? To get the prices down, make them affordable. We have to move to a one-to-many relationship with people,
Right.
as opposed to only having one-to-one relationships with people.
Right.
And that's where subscriptions, education platforms, a hybrid of DIY, limited scope, and full service when necessary is all going to kind of come to play.
Excellent. Excellent. Another question from Chris here. What kind of reactions have you received from clients or potential clients? If you've had, I'm assuming you've had some clients already.
I'm assuming the clients for the law firm.
Yep.
They don't care. They don't care at all. Like at the end of the day, it's like, I need some help. Can you do that? Right. Like I give these examples to people all the time. Like before LegalZoom and all that stuff, I ran the LA County Bar Lawyer Referral Service. And so I would speak with consumers all the time, right? Like, help, I need this help. I need this help. And everyday consumers, they don't know how to evaluate attorneys. So I'll give you an example in family law. Say Alan Rodriguez, sophisticated consumer of legal services. I say I was going to getting a divorce with my wife, and I knew she was going to fight. I knew this is going to litigation. So when I'm interviewing an attorney, I'd say like, okay, you're a family law attorney. How many divorces have you litigated in the last year is the question I'd probably ask, right?
Right.
And they're like, well, I like to settle. I like to do this, that. Like, okay, my question is, how many have you litigated in the last year? One. Maybe you're not the guy for me, but I'm a sophisticated consumer of legal services. Your average family law person's like, hey, I've been served with divorce papers. I don't know what to do next. Can you guys help, and how much?
Top of Google. They found
That's
them on
it.
top of Google. Right.
Yeah. So they kind of don't care. And from our perspective, like there's no non-attorneys practicing at Singular Law Group, right? So there's no like, hey, we're in Arizona ABS, like, like what they're going to be like, what does that even mean?
Yeah. But the person serving them is a licensed attorney. That's all they care about.
That's it. Right. So there's nothing changed about that. Right. Like and in Arizona, here's the other thing in Arizona in particular, like only attorneys can sell. Right. So like you can have an intake person that schedules an appointment, but only an attorney can kind of review an engagement letter and quote a fee in Arizona. So, we don't even have like non-attorney people selling or getting engagement letters signed at Singular Law.
Okay.
Ethics opinions there.
Okay. So all of that, but the marketing, the management, all that stuff is where you come in.
Yeah.
And then the sale, how to convert comes down to the lawyer.
Yeah. At the end of the day, I think that becomes less like law is less of a sell when there's pricing predictability, right? Like, hey, you want a divorce? If you can't afford full service, we've got a limited scope option that gets you started in the right foot. That costs $1,000. Like what's the sell there? Right? Like you're buying this thing off the shelf.
That's right.
Yeah. And our promise is quality, reliability, right? Like experience, things of that nature. Like everybody at Singular Laws is in good standing with the state bar, all that sort of thing. So that's our promise to the customer. But our other promise would be like pricing predictability. So it's less of a sell at that point anyway.
Right. Which is really interesting because that gets back down to the data that you have from years of working in the marketing space. Yeah. So that's really impressive. What were in doing this? What were some of the obstacles you faced when you decided to do this? Were there any particular obstacles?
Yeah, walking through the process, because again, I think, there's enough business for everybody to go around, and the more people that jump into this, the more case studies we're going to have to show that this should, kind of move across the country. Right. So, okay. So it's a pretty straightforward process. We applied pretty early on. You go to the Arizona Supreme Court website, and then there's like licensing registration, there's ABS, you find an application there, right? So
Right.
when we did ours, it was this weird chicken and egg. They hadn't thought it through. They were like, well, we wanted to launch as a law firm. And so they were like, okay, well, if Alan's going to buy a law firm, like I can't actually own and start the law firm until we're approved.
Okay.
So we had to kind of think of like, but then one of the questions were like, what's your structure going to be like? We're like, well, I don't know until you approve, like we don't kind of know, like, that sort of thing. So what we did is like, we're like, you know what, Mary, we'll set this firm up with you're 100% owner. If our application's approved, I'll become the majority shareholder. And so we had an attorney draft an operating agreement of what that would look like if approved.
Okay.
Yeah. So
contingent on the approval.
Yeah. So,
okay.
So that's how we kind of addressed that. So the application itself was, I don't know, maybe 10 pages. It's not very complex. They actually made it pretty easy. They do ask questions about how you intend to address access to justice, which I think is important because that's at the end of the day, that's kind of what's motivating this. Everything else is pretty straightforward. Like, have you ever been involved in lawsuits? They're looking for good moral character,
right?
Things of that nature. Like, are you a shady business person, right? That sort of thing. What your operations will be like? What service areas do you intend to service? For a law firm, it's $6,000.
Okay.
The application fee. So there's a $6,000 hurdle that you have to overcome in the beginning. I think like in terms of access to justice, that could probably be lower.
Yeah. Yeah.
But whatever. I mean, $6,000. So there's that. And then
did you have to do a background test or a background check?
Yeah, they do a background check. Like I said, they interviewed Mary. They didn't interview me for some reason. But the application in the first go was a little confusing in some parts. But I'll say this, the Arizona Supreme Court staff were amazing. They were extraordinarily helpful and responsive. They really want this to work. Like clearly, they really want it to work. So a shout out to them for going out of their way. So we submitted our application, and then there were some hiccups in like the process. We would kind of drop in and listen to these approval sessions where the committee would, they're publicly available sessions, by the way. So if anybody's interested, you should drop in. I think they do it like the first Thursday of every month or something. The schedule's on the website. But one thing that was very encouraging is the state Supreme Court justice. I can't remember his name, unfortunately, but he had said something at one of the initial meetings. He was like, hey folks, our problem is to not try to find all the reasons, or our goal is not to try and find all the reasons to not approve these applications. Our goal is to make this work in Arizona and to approve as many that make sense, right? Like, you don't want to be negligent, like,
right,
kind of run through the motions, but just because you don't like their concept or their approach isn't a disqualifier, is what he was saying, right?
Yeah, I mean, he set it up optimistically.
Yeah,
we want this to move forward. So don't come in here with all the reasons why it won't work, which is a problem dealing with government.
Yeah, so the application's now online, and I hear it's been streamlined a little bit. So it's probably an easier process. It wasn't too difficult back then. It was just kind of getting in line and waiting for the committee. When you make yourself available for the session in case any of the committee members have questions. And quite honestly, so the day we were approved, there was a couple of other organizations seeking approval, and the committee seemed to be putting the screws on them a little bit. And I think I know why. Whatever, those recordings I think are available. I'll let you guys listen. But so anyhow, when it came to ours, I started getting a little nervous, right? I was like, oh man, they're going to put the screws on us. And the Supreme Court just, any questions for Singular Law Group? And, hands go up right away. And one of the first question was like, what motivated you to do this? This is so cool.
You're kidding.
Question was like, well, we want to contribute to access to justice. We want to kind of, finish this trajectory that we've been on. Like, this is a way to actually deliver it, not just talk about it. Right. And all but 3 minutes and we were approved.
That's really, It's almost heartwarming, really, because that they're going into it with a different approach than we've seen a lot of other regulators deal with these issues.
I mean, Mary and I, like, we did lean pretty heavily on our CVs, right? You know,
sure.
like, being advisors to different bar foundations, organizations, things of that nature. But yeah.
But I mean, reputation matters. We all know that. So I think that's important. We've got about 10 minutes left here with Alan. So if you've got questions, get them in. Chase Earl says he loves that you're educating on this process, Alan, because it's super important that people realize it's an accessible an approachable thing to do. And I agree with you that the $6,000 might be a little steep if the goal is access to justice, but it's not the biggest regulatory fee I've heard of. So
and it's going to cost you a lot more to set up a Subway sandwich franchise.
Right.
I mean?
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. Exactly. But that's exactly as you were describing the process.
$bucks. I mean, come on.
Yeah. As you were describing the process, though, I thought of it very much like this is a planning commission type of process.
Yeah.
Right. If you want to build a building and this is the process you go through, which is okay. If it didn't sound too onerous.
No, and you know what? To be fair, like I mean, they need money to fund this, right?
Yeah.
Like they need money to process these applications that was a lot of time that they spent, you know, kind of answering questions, being on this committee, paying for the Zoom, all that sort of thing. So it's fine.
Yeah. Yeah. What would you recommend? Do you think you'd like to see other non-lawyer owners venture into this space?
Yeah. You know, like, so what's really exciting for me is like, I mean, I grew up in a community that like you can clearly see the inadequate access to justice, I would say, right? You know, I grew up lower income community, that sort of thing. And, you know, law is expensive for all kinds of reasons. I don't want this to be a talk about like lawyers or lousy business people or whatever. Lawyers get beat up too much about that. Law is expensive for all kinds of reasons. And part of that reason is it's the consumer and the client too, right? Like they're paying for urgency. Like they find themselves in trouble and now some professional has to stop what they're doing and like, you know, meet their deadline, right?
It's like you're paying a rush rate.
Yeah. And so, you know, that's part of it. Like the responsibility goes both ways. It's not just the lawyer, but like, I think if there are more ABSs and more flexibility in how lawyers could practice and the services that they can offer people, then law can move from like a firefighting kind of role to more of like a concierge doctor, right? Mm-hmm. Where, you know, there's the ER physician that's going to treat the heart attack and then move you over to a cardiologist. And then there's like the preventative medicine person that's going to be educating you on eating healthier, exercising, all those sorts of things to kind of prevent, right? And I think law firms then imagine that law firms can now be community hubs of like creating generational wealth for lower income people, because there's a law firm that's a hybrid of like financial advising, right? Like legal services, estate planning, healthcare even, right? Like that's kind of possible. Like, you know, there's this concept of non-legal services. I can't remember the rule. It's like 5 point something or whatever. Like lawyers, they can still get nailed as lawyers if they're also a real estate broker or something like that, right? Like, so ABS models, re-regulation, when you kind of think about it that way, like lawyers should want more flexibility in how they could kind of treat their clients, right? Like provide value to their clients.
I remember asking this question to my dad as relatively young, because I was working in his firm and doing things like that. And I was like, hey, you know, why don't we get a private investigator in here and get an accountant in here? And like, why don't, you know, offer a whole variety of services that we were using all the time? And he said, you can't really do that as a lawyer. So that was California. And
as an ABS, you can.
But as an ABS, you could.
That's where I think we can really, like, lawyers can have this transformative impact on society in the way that, like, I have lots of lawyer friends. I mean, nobody went to law school to like learn how to set up phones and troubleshoot internet in their office, right?
Right.
Like they like, I'm gonna fix the world's problems, right? You know, that sort of thing. And then they get punched in the face, right? Dealing with all this like stuff.
Right.
And so I think like that's the other side of re-regulation. It's not just about the business owner owning. Everybody's focused on that part of it. It's about the lawyer now having the flexibility to have a transformative impact on society.
Yeah, I like that. Dave Turner asks, are there other states other than Arizona that are looking into this? And this goes right into your topic on sandboxes that you wanted to get to. Are there other states other than Arizona looking into this approach rather than Sandbox, the all-in ABS approach?
Not to my knowledge. So I think Arizona was the first bold, action-taking state to just go all in. I think like Utah's using the Sandbox model. And again, to me, the Sandbox is really just a compromise, right? There's like this political pressure, like the clear evidence that we're failing a lot of people. And they're like, oh, okay, you got us. We're going to create this Sandbox.
Right. It makes the regulators feel warm and fuzzy.
Yeah. I mean, California. So when I was on the task force of California, we thought like, hey, California's a pretty progressive state. Like this is probably going to just be all in. And sure enough, one of the, I'll go ahead and say, I don't know how people feel about this, but like the court representatives of California were one of the, like, I wouldn't say opponents. I wouldn't go that far, but they were like, there was a comment one time that came up in a session where somebody had said, if everybody just had access to justice tomorrow, the courts would be overwhelmed, and we just don't want that. Wow. And like another way to think about it was like, hey, this could be overwhelming administratively, so we also have to learn how to innovate.
Right.
Right. But like instead it was like, no, maybe we should do Sandbox, right? So
right.
To my knowledge, Dave, I don't know that any other state is going all in, although in DC, that's been around for decades where you can have non-attorney ownership as well. I think it's minority ownership only.
Okay.
And then in some very limited capacity too. But that's the only other jurisdiction that I know of that's just been all in.
Yeah.
Everywhere else is kind of considering a sandbox.
I've only, in fact, as I said before, several people are here. I had been pre-promoting this as I thought it was part of the Sandbox rather than the ABS. Chris Brown asks, do you have any ongoing reporting requirements as an ABS?
We do. So I think when we first applied, it was supposed to be an annual audit, but I think now it's like a quarterly reporting of our compliance. And then when Mary asked them for a template or a guidance or like a compliance checklist, they were like, we're hoping you can create that, right? So we do have like quarterly compliance requements.
But they didn't tell you what it was, so they were hoping you would.
Yeah, I mean, like, look, they want to make sure that we're following the RPC, the new RPC, right? The Rules of Professional Conduct in Arizona, and that we're respecting the requirements of ABS, right? Like I'm not any claim privilege, like all that sort of thing. So some of the things that we've done, like every staff member at Singular.law Group, right? Whether attorney or non-attorney, they have to go through UPL training. So unauthorized practice of law. So the person answering the phone, that's critical that they go through UPL training, to not like somebody says, hey, I've been served some divorce papers. I think there's a deadline. Do you know what that is? And if the receptionist says 30 days, that could be construed as advice, right?
Right.
They go through UPL training and they might say like, I don't want to take a guess and quite honest, I'm not qualified to answer that. So what I can do is connect you with one of our family law attorneys to get that consultation. So that's an example of the things that we're doing. So we're just going to hand over all those materials, to kind of demonstrate like who's, this is the employee, this is their training date. Here's what we've done. Here's our CRM. Here's how we check for conflict, all the stuff that law firms do.
Right. Excellent. Anything you want to add about this that we haven't covered yet tonight?
No, I mean, like, we just from our position, we're very like version 1, like we have our website, it's singular.law. If people want to take a look at it, that was really just kind of our placeholder on the internet. We're currently redesigning that. We hope to launch the beginning of the year as a product focused firm where we offer these things that consumers already want, pricing predictability, shopping online, all those sorts of things, right? So keep an eye on that. We are going to be starting to vlog and blog more frequently, both for the consumer side, right? Like for, obviously we want to touch more people. Reach is important to us.
Yep.
But on the access to justice side, we want to be transparent in our own journey, share our own data, what worked, what's not working, so that way other people who decide to kind of contribute to the access to justice movement.
We'll have some actual data to work
and
with.
avoid our mistakes too.
Yeah, I think that's great. That's great. Alan, where do people get in touch with you?
On Twitter at Allen, ALLEN _Rodriguez with a Z, singular.law, or at 1400.com.
Perfect. Thank you. And he spelled it out. See, he's done podcasts before, folks, because he even spelled it out for the audio listeners as well. I appreciate that. Our guest tonight, final guest of the season, Alan Rodriguez. Thanks, Alan, for being here. Don't disappear when we stop recording. I'll tell you about we'll do some follow-up. Thank you to all of our guests tonight in Facebook and in Zoom. We appreciate the questions and appreciate you spending some time with us. We'll be back. I don't know when. I'm going to take a hiatus and work on some other projects. So we'll see you next year sometime. Thanks again, Alan, and happy Veterans Day.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks. Bye-bye.